Maya walked down the aisle in her grandmother's coral beads, smiling through her veil, completely unaware that with every step she took, she was waking spirits that had been silent for 50 years. By the time she reached the altar, the earth beneath her feet had already begun to tremble, and the ancestors who swore never to forgive her bloodline were rising from their graves, ready to speak. In a small village in eastern Kenya, there's a family that hasn't celebrated a single wedding in half a century. Not because they didn't want to, but because every time they tried, something went horribly wrong. Grooms disappeared days before the ceremony. Brides fell ill with fevers no doctor could explain. Children were born, but they never lived long enough to marry. The elders called it a curse. The women called it grief. And for 50 years, leaders of the ancestors refused to bless a single union. But on a warm Saturday morning in July 2023, a 26-year-old woman named Maya decided she'd had enough of living in fear. She was going to marry the man she loved, whether the ancestors approved or not. What she didn't know was that her decision would do more than break a curse. It would wake the dead. Maya grew up hearing the stories. Her great-grandmother, a woman named Tatura, had been promised to a wealthy elder chosen by the village oracle, but Tatura was in love with someone else, a quiet carpenter named Kamba, who had nothing but kind eyes and strong hands. The night before her arranged wedding, Tatura ran away with Kamba into the forest. They were found 3 days later, and the elders were furious. They gathered the entire village and declared that Tatura had disrespected the ancestors, and for that her bloodline would pay. No woman born from her womb would ever know peace in marriage. No union would be blessed. The curse was spoken, and it held. Tatura's daughter was widowed at 23. Her granddaughter lost 3 pregnancies in a row, and Maya's own mother never married at all, too afraid of what might happen if she tried. But Maya was different. She didn't see the curse as destiny, she saw it as a challenge. When she met Baraka, a schoolteacher with a calm voice and a patient heart, she knew he was the one. He didn't care about the stories. He didn't flinch when her aunts warned him to stay away. He loved her, and that was enough. So they set a date, chose a venue, and invited everyone they knew. Maya's mother begged her to reconsider. The village elders shook their heads in disapproval, but Maya stood firm. If love is a curse, she thought, then let me be the one to break it. The morning of the wedding, the air felt different, heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. The drummers arrived early to set up, but when they tried to play, their rhythms faltered. One of them swore he heard a woman's voice humming from inside his drum. Another felt his hands go cold, even though the sun was blazing. The goats in the courtyard bleated nervously, pulling at their ropes. An old woman selling flowers at the gate refused to enter. She said the spirits were restless, that she could feel them moving beneath the ground. Maya's mother lit candles at the family altar and prayed quietly, her hands shaking. The village priest, a man named Elder Wekesa, arrived with his staff and his prayer beads. He had officiated dozens of weddings in his life, but something about this one made him uneasy. He pulled Maya's mother aside and said, "Stop this! The air is not right today." But Maya's mother shook her head. "If the ancestors are angry," she said, "let them speak for themselves." And so the wedding went on. Guests arrived in their finest clothes, chattering nervously. Children ran through the courtyard, laughing and chasing each other. The altar was decorated with white lilies and red roses. Everything looked perfect. But beneath the surface, something ancient was stirring. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the weight of what Maya was carrying. 50 years earlier, when Tatura ran away with Kamba, she didn't just defy tradition, she defied the ancestors themselves. In that village, marriage wasn't just a union between two people, it was a covenant between families, between the living and the dead. The elders believed that every major decision, especially marriage, had to be approved by the spirits of those who came before. When Tatura chose love over duty, the ancestors took it as betrayal. They withdrew their blessings. Crops failed that year, 3 elders died within a month, and every woman born from Tatura's line suffered in love. Some lost their husbands to accidents, others were abandoned. Some never married at all, too terrified to try. The curse became a shadow that followed them everywhere. Maya's own childhood was shaped by it. She watched her mother cry alone at night. She saw her aunts grow bitter and cold. She heard the whispers at school, the way people spoke about her family like they were cursed, broken, unworthy of happiness. But instead of breaking her, it made her angry, angry enough to fight back. So when Kamba proposed, she said yes without hesitation, and when people warned her, she smiled and said, "Then let the ancestors come. I'm ready to meet them." The ceremony was supposed to start at noon, but by the time Maya appeared, the sun was already sinking low, casting long shadows across the courtyard. She wore her grandmother's coral beads, her mother's white dress, and a veil that had been passed down through 3 generations. She looked beautiful, radiant, but the moment she stepped into the courtyard, the drums went silent. Not because the drummers stopped playing, they didn't. Their hands kept moving, but no sound came out. The wind picked up, swirling dust into spirals around her feet. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elder Weksa gripped his staff tightly, his knuckles white. Kamba stood at the altar, his face pale but determined. He reached out his hand and Maya took it. The priest opened his prayer book and began to speak, but his voice cracked. The words wouldn't come. Maya looked around at the faces staring at her, some in fear, some in awe, and she felt something shift deep inside her chest. A presence. A voice that wasn't hers, but felt familiar. "Daughter of Tatura," it whispered, "do you remember us?" Her knees buckled. Kamba caught her, his eyes wide with panic. "Maya, what's wrong?" But Maya didn't answer. Her eyes had turned distant, glowing faintly, as if something ancient had looked through them. And then, slowly, she began to move. Maya's body moved in ways she had never been taught. Her feet tapped the earth in rhythms older than language. Her hands traced patterns in the air, weaving invisible threads that shimmered faintly in the fading light. The wind danced with her, and the trees swayed, as if bowing to something unseen. The guests gasped. Some knelt, others wept. Children clung to their mothers, sensing something sacred unfolding before them. Elder Thomas dropped his staff, his mouth open in shock. "It's them," he whispered. "The ancestors. They're here." Kamba tried to reach for Maya, but his feet wouldn't move. He stood frozen, watching the woman he loved become a bridge between worlds. And then the voices came, not loud, but everywhere. Whispers rising from the ground, from the trees, from the air itself. Women's voices, men's voices, children's laughter. All the souls who had been tied to Tatura's bloodline, all the spirits who had watched in silence for 50 years. They circled the courtyard in shimmering light, translucent figures barely visible but undeniably real. One of them, an elderly woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. She reached out and touched Maya's shoulder. "You have done what we could not," she said softly. "You have chosen love without fear, and for that we release you." The moment her hand touched Maya, the air exploded with light. The drums roared back to life, louder than ever. The ground trembled, not with anger, but with joy. And Maya collapsed into Kamba's arms, gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face. For a long moment, no one moved. The light faded, the voices quieted, the wind settled into a gentle breeze. Elder Wekesa rose slowly, his face streaked with tears. "The curse," he said, his voice trembling. "It's gone." Maya looked up at Kamba, her eyes still wet, and smiled. "It's over," she whispered. He pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Around them, the guests began to stand, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Someone started clapping, then another, and another. Soon the entire courtyard erupted in cheers, in song, in celebration. The drummers played with a fierce joy, their hands moving faster than ever. Children danced, elders embraced, and Maya's mother fell to her knees, sobbing with relief. For the first time in 50 years, a wedding in that family was complete. Not just complete, blessed. The ancestors had spoken, and they had forgiven. Maya and Kamba were married under the setting sun, their silhouettes framed against a sky painted in gold and crimson. And as they kissed, a soft rain began to fall, gentle and warm, like a blessing from the heavens. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Flowers began to bloom in places they hadn't grown in decades. The village well, which had run dry for years, suddenly filled with clean water. Women who had been unable to conceive found themselves pregnant. It was as if the land itself had been waiting for this moment, for the curse to be lifted, for the ancestors to smile again. Maya and Kamba moved into a small house on the edge of the village, and people would often stop by just to see them, to touch Maya's hand, to ask for her blessing. She became a symbol of hope, proof that even the oldest wounds could heal. Her mother, who had spent her entire life afraid, finally began to laugh again. She planted a garden, something she hadn't done since she was a girl. And one evening, as she watered the flowers, she whispered to the sky, "Thank you, Mama Tatura. Thank you for sending us Maya." 6 months later, Maya discovered she was pregnant. The news spread through the village like wildfire. People gathered at her door with gifts, with prayers, with songs. And when her daughter was born healthy and strong, they named her Tatura, after the woman who had started it all. They say the ancestors never truly sleep. They only wait, watching over the bloodlines they protect, the stories they carry. And when someone brave enough comes along, someone willing to face the past without fear, they wake, not with anger, but with love. Maya's story spread far beyond her village. It became a legend, a reminder that curses are only as strong as the fear that feeds them, that love, real love, is the most powerful force there is, and that sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to live fully, boldly, without apology. This is the story of the wedding that awoke the ancestors, a story of a woman who refused to let fear choose her future, a story of forgiveness, of healing, of a family finally set free. How would you feel if this was your family? If you carried a curse like this for generations, would you have had the courage to face it the way Maya did? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the stories that change us are the ones we pass on.